I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, Kimberly has been working very hard to prepare for this. This is going to be some of the best work you've ever seen her do. I'm so excited about this webinar. And a lot of time and thought's gone in. I've been there to watch it, and this is a culmination of what literally amounts to months of work. So I want to start just by saying thank you, Kimberly, for the time, the effort, the dedication you put into this, and to educating all of us. So how's that for an introduction?
That's pretty good. Thank you.
You ready to get rolling? I'm going to get out of your way because we have good stuff to cover. So let's get into it.
All right. Let me just pull up my presentation here. Okay, welcome everyone. If you are attending this webinar, I'm assuming that you probably watched part one back in September. And this is a culmination of information. Part one was a general overview on how to use the divergent channels and understand them within Acugraph. And then one of the treatment strategies within Acugraph to treat the divergent channels was using ion pumping cords. So in today's webinar, we're going to talk very specifically about ion pumping cords and how to incorporate them into your practice. So I do also want to say that today's webinar is an advanced course. So it is assumed that you already have a really good general practice of a general understanding of acupuncture, that you're well trained in acupuncture, that you're well trained in Acugraph, and at this point you're wanting to expand your treatment strategies and expand your knowledge. And so a lot of what I'm going to teach you is on a more advanced level. So I hope that you're excited about that. Many practitioners have been asking for more advanced stuff. Let's see, I'm going to. So since the last webinar, there have been 2 blog posts that have gone out. One of them was a webinar follow, patients are getting better faster, and then there were some studies on ion pumping cords. In the webinar follow-up, you learned, I talked about my approaches to treatment and how the divergent treatment and tendinomuscular treatments is something that I combine together. And so the divergent treatment that I use with the ion pumping cords is more of a root treatment, and the musculoskeletal portion of what I do is more of a branch. And so today's webinar is very specific to the ion pumping cord portion of that treatment. Before I get into all of the nuts and bolts on a clinical point of view, I am going to turn the time over to Dr. Larson, and he's going to talk science. He's going to tell you why ion pumping cords work, how they work, what the science is behind them, and he'll talk at a whole level that is well beyond my head. I just get really excited because I'm using them and I get really great results. And so I'll come back to that in a moment. But for right now, let's turn it over to Dr. Larson.
All righty, I guess my break's over already, huh? Okay, so regarding the science behind ion pumping cords, see if we can get that to go. We really have to thank Dr. Yoshio Manaka, medical doctor in Japan, PhD in biology, and an excellent, very accomplished acupuncturist and researcher. This is a guy who devoted his life to not only treating patients, but to researching what works, why it works, and researching even some of the ancient relationships in acupuncture. All of the things that we've been taught, so we're all taught in school that, oh, the meridians work this way, and this is where the channels are, and this is where the points are, and these 2 meridians are connected together philosophically because they share the same element, etc. Well, he went through and verified a lot of those relationships, the direction of energy flow. So a tremendous scientist and a brilliant man. He was a student of Akabane. And you may recall Akabane developed or pioneered the method of measuring meridians by taking burning moxapunk and stroking it on the Jingwell points and counting the strokes until the patient felt the heat, and using that to diagnose the chi level in each channel. So Dr. Manaka was thinking in terms of channel, thinking in terms of chi, And he developed the use of ion pumping cords specifically so that you could take an area where there's too much chi and move that chi to an area where there's not enough. Kind of a one-way sort of a thing. The way that he originally developed these was during the war, during World War II, experiences treating burn victims. He confirmed the unidirectional aspect of meridian flow, and that by hooking up with a burn victim, they would put foil, aluminum foil and gauze over a burn, and then they would connect a wire to that and connect another wire somewhere else and create an ionic gradient. An ion simply means charged particle. So you'd have a positive charge, a negative charge, and by creating a flow in one direction, they were healing burns very quickly, and found that with ion pumping cords, you could achieve a profound treatment and shift for the patient in about 10 minutes. So what is an ion pumping cord? Why does it work? What's the science behind it? It's really a simple device, actually. In order to make sure that electricity can flow one direction but not flow the other direction, you have a one-way valve in there. In this case, it's an electronic component called a diode. And diodes, they have an anode and a cathode, a positive and a negative side, and electricity will only flow in one direction, from the anode to the cathode. Now, the way that happens is that a diode is made of a semiconductor. Normally, you would use silicon as a semiconductor because it works well. It has a unidirectional flow. That's why all of our computers are based on silicon chips. It's because it is a semiconductor and because it has directional current flow. That's how you can make computational processing even possible. So a diode, pretty simple. Essentially, you have a chunk of silicon. You have it arranged in the right direction or oriented in the right direction so that current only flows one way. But here's the problem. As you flow from the anode to the cathode, the amount of electricity getting through drops, because although it lets it flow, it restricts it somewhat, and so you lose voltage. In electronics, this is called a voltage drop. And the voltage drop going through that diode is fine in most electrical applications, but it's not so good when you're dealing with the very tiny biological currents that are created in the body. You don't want to be restricting that any more than you absolutely have to because it's already so small to begin with. And so you have to use not silicon, but a very specialized element. You have to use germanium, and it has to be extraordinarily pure germanium. Like you have to, they call it 5 nines pure, 99.999% pure germanium, even 6 nines pure, in order to get the diode to work properly. And so when you have a germanium diode, they have all of the advantages of a silicon diode, meaning one-way current flow, and it won't let it flow back. But it also has very low voltage drop. So almost all the current gets through when you have a high quality, pure germanium diode. And so to make an ion pumping cord that works, that's what you have to use. And it's kind of a specialized thing. It's not something that you can really make yourself very well. Believe me, I looked into it. That's the kind of guy I am. I tried. But what we found was the ones that are supplied that we can buy from Japan that have the correct diode in them and that were originally designed by Manaka, they're the best on the market. And particularly because they also have the gripping clips that you're going to see. So that's the science about how it works. And when you look at an ion pumping cord, there's that little black section in the middle. That's where the diode is. And that's what makes sure that the energy only flows one direction. So with that, Kimberly, I think we are up to your video. Do you want me to go ahead and play your video now?
I have a question.
Yeah.
One of the things that people often want to know about this on the science end of the ion pumping cords is the testing it to make sure that it's working.
Uh-huh.
Can you talk a little bit about the device that's used to test it?
Yeah. In fact, you know what I should do is during the video, I'll grab a tester and I'll just do a quick testing demo on video. How about that?
That'd be perfect.
Okay, so I'll demonstrate that after the video. And right now, are we ready to start your demo video?
Let me just give a little introduction to it.
Go ahead.
So for this demo video, when you are using ion pumping cords, I am teaching you how I use them in relation to the divergent treatment within AccuGraph. So I am teaching you I'm walking you through my thought process. I am walking you through a patient protocol, and I'm helping you recognize how to choose which points and then going through the process. So this is sort of what you want to catch from this video is the nuts and bolts, how to clip it on, how to use them, how to think when you're using them. So we'll walk you through this point next, and we'll go ahead and start with the video.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start it for you here.
Okay, I am here today to teach you about ion pumping cords. We've had a lot of questions, and I thought that if I did a demo for you that you would be able to see how they work. What you need to do first is, your first step is to graph your patient, and after you've graphed your patient, you can add points to the treatment plan. The way we're doing that today is, if you notice in the far right corner of your treatment strategies, if you click on the Divergent Channel treatment, all of the points at the bottom will be added to the treatment plan, and you will see them on your screen. So in a previous webinar, we've talked about understanding the differences between the different sections of the Divergent Channel treatment. Basically, there's 3 styles of treatment within the entire treatment plan. I've differentiated them on your screen in yellow. So the top 4 points in this treatment strategy are extraordinary vessels. The next 4 points are divergent points, and the last 4 have to do with left-right imbalances, and they are back shoe points on the body. What you'll want to do after you have, well, let's go back a second. When you're deciding which points to treat, you've got multiple options within those 3 strategies. You could treat all of them if you wished. You'd have to do a front treatment and a back treatment, or the example treatment that I'm going to talk about today is just using the front treatment. So if the computer screen were in front of me, I would delete the bottom 4 points on the urinary bladder channel and move on so that just the top 8 points were showing. So when you're doing treatment, you will treat as you normally would. I am going to grab needles. And it's fairly simple. You are going to follow what you're told on the screen. So I'm going to do stomach 40 on the left. If you'll notice, I'm using a metal needle. You could use sarins with a plastic end, but and I may be using those further in the treatment, but when you're using the ion pumping cords, you want to be able to hook metal to metal, so the clip needs to go onto metal. So I did stomach 40 on the left. I'm going to do large intestine 5 on the right. And the needles don't have to go extremely deep, just similar to how you would use them if you weren't using ion pumping cords. The next point I'm going to do is small intestine 3 on the left, and then I'm going to do bladder 62 on the right.
Is there anything magic to that order, Kimberly, or can you do them? Can you insert the needles in any order as long as you get them all in?
You can do them in any order. I tend to get not confused, but it's easier for me to start from the top and work to the bottom so that I'm staying with my left and my right, because this is a little different than my normal strategy, or my this is my normal strategy, but I do have to think a little bit on which side. So next I am going to do spleen 9 on the left. And I'm going to, within the typical divergent channel strategies through Mikishima, stomach 1 is the divergent point. We won't be needling stomach 1, we'll be needling stomach 2. So I'm going to needle stomach 2 on the left. And when I am doing the face points, I actually like to use a sarin needle. So the type of sarin that I use for treatment when I'm doing the face, it's type J, so it's a really, really thin needle, and it the patient doesn't feel any pain. It's very
On the left.
on the left. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we are going to do that on the left, and next I'm going to do bladder 40 on the right. Bladder 40 is under the knee, and when the patient is lying in this position, it's not hard to do. You just have to adjust slightly to where the needle is, and then when the patient relaxes, the needle is sticking out. So when you hook the cord to that needle, it's not a problem to have the connection that you need. Let's see, and then finally my last point, again, I'm going to jump back to a sarin needle because I am working on the face. And this needle will be bladder, the suggested treatment point is bladder 1. I'm going to use bladder 2. Bladder 1 would actually be right here next to the eye, and I am more comfortable with treating bladder 2. So I am going to do that. So the next thing I do after I have inserted the needles, before I put the wires on, the points on the face, when you clip a wire to them, they could fall out easily, and especially with the really tiny sarins. So I use tape. It looks like this. It is I forget exactly what it's called, but they call it micropore. And it is, L.A.C. sells it. And so I take this tiny bit of tape and I tape down the needle. And then when I hook the wire onto it, it stays nicely. I don't tape all of the needles in the body. I just tape the sarins on the face. So we are going to tape this one as well. And I just turn the needle a little bit and add. Does that hurt at all?
No, I can't feel anything.
Perfect. So the next step is the ion pumping cord. So we put the needle in the 8 points. And the next thing you need to know about ion pumping cords. Ion pumping cords are delicate in nature, so you want to take care of them. You'll notice that in my clinic, I've got little hooks right here on a cabinet. I think if there were hooks here on the wall, that I would have them hanging individually, and I would grab each one. Today you're watching me, and I've got them hanging around my neck. Problem with hanging around my neck, sometimes they get a little bit discombobulated, so give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, so then it's really easy after that. You have chosen your left and right side that you put your needles on, and now what you're going to recognize, if the point is red in your treatment plan, you're going to clip the red clip on the needle, and if the point is marked blue, you're going to use the black needle. So for stomach 40 and large intestine 5, those two go together. I will clip the red on large intestine 5, and this clip, when you pinch them, notice when you look at the clip, they're open. When you pinch it together, that is when it creates the claw that's able to grab the wire. And then when you let go, then it hooks onto the wire. So I will show you how that's done right here. So I'm going to pinch it to create the claw, then I'm going to grab the needle, and then it holds on. So that is large intestine 5, and then I'm going to take the black to stomach 40.
And Kimberly, does it matter if you clip the needle shaft or the needle handle as long as they're both metal?
As long as they're both metal, it doesn't matter. I tend to do the shaft a little bit closer to the skin so it doesn't have as much pull on the needle.
Yeah, it's not going to bend over.
So it's not going to bend over.
Okay.
So it depends on your preference. That seems to be mine, as long as the needle is in deep enough so that it's not going to pull it out. That's something you don't have to go really deep, but you just have to be cautious. Okay, next we're going to do small intestine 3 and bladder 62. So small intestine 3 is blue, so I am going to put the black on small intestine 3, and I'm going to clip the red on bladder 62.
And something you were talking to me about a little earlier is, you know, you'll have several cords here, and you said it's important to make sure they don't get tangled or hang off the table because then they're pulling on a needle. So kind of pay attention to your cords.
So recognize here, I've got them just sort of draped on her body. If I was careless and I just let this fall over to the side, then there's going to be more pull on the needle and it can pull out. So patients don't even recognize that they're hooked to these needles. It's very relaxing and it just sits in that way. So I'm just a little bit careful in how I drape the needles over the center of the body. All right, let me move on here. Spleen 9 is going to be the black clip. And stomach 1 is going to be the red. All right, so that just clipped really nicely and easily onto her face. And then for the next 2 needles, I'm going to do the black on bladder 40. And remember, I left just a little bit sticking out here so I could get it. On this one, I went ahead and clipped it onto the handle instead of the shaft because it was easier for me to gain access. And then finally, I'm going to do the red here, there. So essentially, this is your root treatment, and this is enough, perfect to balance the graft. So once all of the needles are hooked up, in 10 minutes of time, this treatment is completely done. It won't matter if you leave the needles longer, but 10 minutes is what's needed in order to complete the treatment. Another common question, let's see, let me move on. So here's things that you want to remember. You want to make sure you get your black and your red correct. So if in your treatment plan the point is blue, you'll put a black clip on. If the point is red, you will put a red clip on. You want to be careful of tangles and then careful of too much tension on the wires. This is very comfortable for the patient to lay the way we have her laying. And I showed you how the clips work, and we talked about where to clip. Bladder 1 and stomach 1, if Acugraph recommends bladder 1 or stomach 1, I always go to the next point on the channel if I am treating with needles. And the 10 minutes. The other question that I get is, if this is balancing the graft, what if the patient also has a headache, or the patient also has digestive issues, or whatever their chief nausea that day, whatever their chief complaint is? I can add more needles at this point to add to the treatment and keep them here for even within that 10 minutes, and the treatment will be done. So this is the root, and you can still add treatment for the branch if I was going to do auricular therapy or anything else. And then if you left the patient for longer than 10 minutes because you were busy in the other room, it wouldn't hurt them. They would just continue to be relaxed when you're done. So we're going to move on to the next example. And do you want to help me pull needles real fast? And in this next example that we're going to talk about, when you're pulling the needles, sometimes I actually use the clip to pull the needle completely, and then you can grasp the needle accordingly, like so. It's actually faster and easier to do it that way. On the face, the tape comes off. Very easy. Sometimes I'll even use the tape to hold the needles together. Perfect. Then when you are done and you have unhooked all of your needles, then you want to carefully take your ion pumping cords and keep them so that they are not tangled. I'll put a couple around my neck because we're going to do another example. Alrighty. The next example that I'm going to do, I won't be doing the full graph, but I'm going to walk you through. So again, in this example, you would graph the patient, and here we have a very messy graph, and you would put the divergent points into the treatment plan. And again, we have extraordinary, divergent, and left-right. If you'll notice something different about this particular graph, there are only 3 extraordinary points listed. And there's a reason for that. I'll go back and look. Notice how high the kidney channel is on that graph. It is extremely high. There's a lot of extra energy in the kidney channel. So if you go and look onto the extraordinary treatment, lung 7 and heart 5, which are very deficient, we'll go back and look. Notice how the lung and heart are so deficient. They're going to pull energy from that kidney channel. So in this treatment strategy, we'll decide which to treat. Again, I'm going to use extraordinary and divergent. I'm going to pull the back shoe points off of my treatment plan. And now we come to a total of 7 treatment points. So on our last example, we had 8 points. This one we have 7. So I'm not going to hook her up for the Sanjiao 10, gallbladder 12, bladder 40, or bladder 1. I'm going to hook her up for the 3 top points: kidney 6, lung 7, and heart 5. And this is how you will do this. You're still going to use 2 wires. So I am going to do kidney 6 on the left. And I am going to do lung 7 on the right. I'm going to do heart 5 on the right. And then, of course, I would do the other 4 points as well, and we would do it the same way that we did it last time. But the way that you would do wires to lung 7, heart 5, and kidney 6 is like so. You are going to take your black, wire number 1, you're going to take your black clip, and you're going to clip it on kidney 6. Again, I'm going to go right here close to the shaft on this one. And it looks like so. And then I'm going to take the red and I'm going to come up to lung 7. Then I am going to take the black on my second wire and I'm going to go back to kidney 6. So what you're going to recognize here is that there are going to be 2 clips on kidney 6, and I will just go right next to it. There's plenty of room, especially if you're using an all silver needle or stainless steel. You wouldn't want to put these 2 clips way on the end of the needle because it would be too heavy. So you just keep them closer to her body. And then I am going to clip heart 5 as so. And then, of course, I would do Sanjiao 10 and gallbladder 12 connected, and I would do bladder 40 and bladder 1 connected, and then I would leave the patient sit for 10 minutes. So the take-home message for our second treatment is that if you only see 3 extraordinary points, you'll still use 2 wires, and you will hook 2 leads up to the same needle. And then the other thing is, recognize that in Acugraph, there are more than the 8 extraordinary vessel points. There are 12 of them. And we've talked about that in a previous webinar. So I've listed them all here. So the new ones, the new master points are large intestine 5, stomach 40, liver 4, and heart 5. So that is the basics on ion pumping cords. And I think you're going to feel confident to move forward and begin treating with them.
All right, Kimberly, you back?
I am back. So there's a lot of questions and I have a lot of answers, of course. Before I jump into the questions, do you want to do that little segment you were going to do about the ion pumping cords?
Yeah. Let me talk about how to test your ion pumping cords, make sure that they're working correctly. So here I have my ion pumping cord. I'm going to try to get up close. This is what Kimberly was talking about with those clips, because when I squeeze the clip here, you can see it makes a little claw like that. And so by squeezing it together, that is where you grasp the needle, just like that. Okay, so I've got the black and I've got the red. And this is an ion pumping cord tester. As you can see, it's got a spot for batteries. You can put a 9-volt battery on it like I have, or you can use AA batteries. Either or. You don't have to put both in. As long as there's one set or the other on there, you're good. On the other side, you see it's got 2 test points and a red LED. And so here's how this works. See if I can hold this up to the camera here and make it work if I have enough hands. I'm going to take the red and I'm going to clip it on there. And when I touch the black, whoops, darn it. These are too big for the clips to hold on to very well. Normally I just touch them, but normally I'm not trying to hold them up for the video. Okay, when I touch the black, you see the light turn on. Now, if I switch those, if I hook the red onto the black side, so it's backwards, and I touch the black, the light will not turn on. So what that verified 2 things by that test. First of all, it showed me that the cord is working, meaning it will turn the light on. Electricity will flow. And that's important because you have no way of knowing that electricity is flowing unless you actually test the cord. Because when you put it on a patient, you just clip it on and you hope that it's working. But if maybe your cord got damaged, maybe you yanked it too hard and broke something, I don't know. It's a good way to know that it's working. Secondly, you know that it only flows in one direction. So you know that diode is working. Because when I touch it one way, it lights, touch it the other way, it does not. So testing your cords, every month or so, just to make sure that everything's working well is a great idea. The testers are not expensive. They're like 19 bucks. And having a tester around keeps all your ion pumping cords in good working order. So there you go. Did that cover it for you, Kimberly?
That did. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I just want to give a shout out to Cameron and our whole crew. I should show you guys some of the funny pictures of us in my treatment room doing that video, but we had a good time creating it. I hope that it was helpful and that you learned from it. Okay, so I'm going to go back to a question that Mary answered. She says, I found an ion pumping cord in a back drawer. It has a black alligator clip on one end with 2 wires coming out of it, going to a red and a green clip. That is not an ion pumping cord. That maybe Adrian knows what type of a cord that might be, but an ion pumping cord definitely has the diode in the middle, and it has a red clip and a black clip, and that's how they work. Sometimes the clips, I have a different type of clip that has a larger clip on it that doesn't have the little claw like Adrian showed. I have used those in my clinic as well, but I don't like them. They're too heavy. They pull the needles out. Inevitably, when I come back in the room, the heaviness of the big clip has pulled the needles out of my patients. So I really like, even though the little claw clip is awkward to figure out at first, once you figure it out, it works the best because of the size, and especially if you're doing multiple clips on one needle. Do you have anything to add to that, Adrian?
No, you absolutely covered it. That's not an ion pumping cord. Whatever it is, it must be for something else.
Yeah, I got a lot of weird cords in drawers that I don't know what they are, but I do know what an ion pumping cord is. So that is not an ion pumping cord. Okay, Robin asks, when do you use 8 extraordinary points and divergent points versus just the 8 extraordinary points? So she says, I find it strange to put ion pumping cords on the face like stomach 2 and bladder 2. So you will find, and as I go into the rest of the presentation, I'm going to show some examples of when I would use each. If I have a patient who has a really, really messy graph, and typically this is a brand new patient, I'm just beginning the treatment process, the graph is just really extreme, then I will use both the divergent and the extraordinary points. If within a treatment series, the patient is beginning to get better and we're getting more to just their basic imbalances, we've taken off a lot of layers, then I'm just working with extraordinary and chief complaint symptoms. And oftentimes if I have a patient who maybe they're a wellness patient and they don't have the great extremes going on, but they do have pretty much a messy graph, I will work with the extraordinary treatments at that point. So I hope that helps a little bit. I'm going to answer the bladder one, or the stomach and the bladder, in just a second. She says, when you tape the face, this is Robin again. When you tape the face, is the tape on the handle or the shaft of the needle? It was hard to tell in the video. So I'm actually taping it onto the handle, and then I am hooking onto the shaft. And then Catherine asks, are all sets of iron pumping cords across the body? They are not. Sometimes you will, Acugraph takes based off of the measurements that it's done within all of the channels. And so it depends on left and right imbalances. Sometimes I'm hooking up needles that are just on the left side of the body or the right side of the body. So it just depends on the graph. So don't be concerned if one time it's cross and one time it's not. It's totally normal to be different. Next question. Could you just tape the ion pumping cords onto the points instead of using needles? I'm thinking for pediatric treatment. I have heard of that strategy. I think if it were me, if I were doing that strategy, I would use red and blue lasers instead. So I would treat the point with lasers. If you have an older pediatric child and you needed to do, let's say, the Divergent and the Extraordinary treatment, if the patient will allow you to, to do the 4 needles and put the cords on them, I maybe with a child would tape the ones to the body just because they're a little bit wiggly, but then I would possibly do the Divergent treatment portion of it with laser and use the blue and red laser. So that's my thought process on that. Looks like I have a couple more. So Acugraph tells you when to cross or not to cross. Yes, it tells you if it's a left or a right. So if one of your point combinations, one's on the left and one's on the right, then you're crossing. If both points that you're hooking together are on the right, then you're not crossing. So it's just a matter of where those needles. All righty. If there aren't any more questions right now, specifically about the webinar, I do have more information to show. So let me get back to my...
You want me to restart the slide presentation, Kimberly?
Please, that would be fantastic.
All righty. So I think you are on this slide.
Yes. So Dr. Larson talked all kinds of amazing science, and I am always so grateful for his scientific mind. And for me, it's a matter of what is happening in my clinic, what I am seeing, feeling, experience, what the experience is with the patient. And so my analysis of, let's see, I feel like my face has to be showing as I'm describing this. My perspective of the Divergent treatment is when you are treating the body and you have this really difficult patient, and you know that if you put a needle in here in the leg and you put another needle in the arm, that you're supposed to be able to move energy in each of those channels, and it's supposed to come together someplace in the middle of the body, and in 24 to 48 hours everything begins to balance, or at least that's the hope. But it depends on of course, it depends on how much is going on the internal aspects and digestion, and how much phlegm damp and how much blood stagnation. There's always so many aspects to what is happening. I feel like the Divergent Channel treatment is this, like I'm a warrior with this well-defined strategy. If I put a needle here and I put another needle here, and instead of trying to make sure everything's going to come together in the middle, I'm the one in control, saying I'm going to pull energy from this channel. I'm going to send it to the wire. I'm going to strengthen this other channel where it's weak. And now that I've made those 2 channels strong, that I know that everything can come together in the middle. And because they are divergent points, I know absolutely that it's reaching the middle. So I get a much stronger treatment strategy in that thought process. And I don't use ion pumping cords and Divergent treatment on every single one of my patients, but there are certain ones where it's just tough and sticky and icky and phlegmy and cruddy, and it just helps me to get the job done faster. When my patients ask me about this, I kind of call it my Robin Hood theory. I said, yeah, this channel has too much and this has too little, and I'm just going to steal from the rich and give to the poor and balance everything out. So this is my non-scientific analysis of ion pumping cords, but It's really what it feels like is happening in the treatment to me. And then the patient perspective, my patients are always asking me, Kimberly, what new thing are you doing? They know that they're guinea pigs in my clinic, and they're always excited when I have something new to share and teach. And so their perspective, they say that when they're laying on the table, it's like a pinball game. You know, if you were to pull the lever and the ball goes in and it just begins to move and go ping, 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 boop, 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 goes all over the place. You like my analysis there? Anyway, when the ball moves all throughout the body, that is what they're experiencing when they're laying on the table, because we have created such a powerful treatment from the two channels that we need to strengthen. Then within, they just feel all this movement going on. And then others will describe it like an out-of-body experience. I've had patients tell me they feel like their body just floated out of their body, and they were so relaxed, and they were sleeping, and they were drooling. So that's the patient perspective. I'm going to be done with my non-scientific analysis here, and we'll move on to the graphs. Let's see. So ion pumping cords. They're obviously a new strategy. I do not use them for every patient that I treat. I'm teaching you what I know and understand about them at this point. I'm sure that will expand and change. But what I do want you to know right now is that the black clip pulls energy out of a channel that has excess energy. So it sedates the channel. The red clip tonifies. It puts energy back into a channel. So if you're using two clips, you can know that one channel has too much, one channel has too little. And by pulling energy out with the black clip and then putting energy back in with the red clip, that's what science is doing. You'll need 4 wires for each treatment room. And I suggest that you find something to hang them on. I think some clips on the wall where you just hang them over a clip would be really nice, because then you're not dealing with messy wires each time. I would like to give a little disclaimer here. You never want to use combined strategies of microcurrent while using ion pumping cords. One practitioner, and I won't share her name on here, shared with me in the very beginning when I started talking about these. She said, "Oh, Kimberly, tell your people never to use microcurrent with ion pumping cords because it's really bad. You will ruin the ion pumping cords because you're adding electricity to them. So don't do that." And recognize that the full effective treatment takes about 10 minutes. Doesn't mean that I won't leave my patient longer, but it's nice to know that in that first 10 minutes, their body has gone into balance. I like to leave the patient in the room under a heat lamp and as cozy and comfortable as possible. And Dr. Larson, did you have a comment?
Oh, I was just going to say, we get asked. We were at PCOM this last weekend, and I had folks coming up to the booth saying, "I love what Kimberly's teaching about ion pumping cords. I wish I knew where to buy some." And I'm like, "What? We didn't make it clear that we actually offer these things for sale." Apparently, we didn't, and so people were like searching the internet, whatever. So I'm putting up right now just a link where people can go to pick them up. We're not here trying to sell you a bunch of stuff. We're just providing the resource so that you can do the treatment and so that you can use your AccuGraph to its full potential. But here they are. This link will show you where you can get the cords, the testers, and we'll leave that up for a few minutes. And then also we will have a handout that Kimberly's prepared. I'll put that up in a few minutes. Back to you, Kimberly.
Thank you. All righty. So I have recognized that I can use now, mind you, this webinar is specifically about ion pumping cords. So I've recognized that I can use ion pumping cords as a root treatment and also a branch treatment. If I'm using an ion pumping cord as a root treatment, my full purpose is to balance the graph. That's always my purpose in a root treatment, regardless of what I'm doing. Even if I was doing an advanced treatment or if I was doing an ear treatment, whatever, I always come up with a treatment to balance the graph. So that is the main concept of what I've taught you so far, based on the divergent channels. I'm going to expand upon that a little and give you some other thought processes. So In my experience, a root treatment is not enough to get a really successful treatment. If you put the body into balance, then move on and do whatever treatment you're going to do with the branch treatment, you will get better results. And so I want to make that really clear. And in today's webinar, I'm not going to teach you all kinds of amazing branch treatments because I've been teaching those all along the way. I am going to, in this webinar, give you a couple of ideas on how to use ion pumping cords as a root treatment. And then I'm going to give a couple ideas of how to use ion pumping cords as a branch treatment. And then typically my branch treatment does not include ion pumping cords. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of ways that you could use ion pumping cords for a branch treatment. And if I was using them for a branch treatment, I would probably choose a different method for my root treatment. I might treat the ear as my root treatment and then use my ion pumping cords as a branch treatment. And then make sure that you also recognize that this isn't expanding your treatment time going, oh, now I have to do that ion pumping cord treatment and then wait 10 minutes and then come back and do a branch treatment. It's not that at all. Hook up your wires for an ion pumping cord root treatment, and then immediately put in whatever needles you want to for a branch treatment. So I just want to be clear about that. All right, onward. So your basic treatment, root treatment for balancing the graph is the divergent treatment. We talked a lot about that and why it works and how it works in the last webinar. But just as a reminder, click on the Divergent Channel treatment box. The points will come up, add those points to your treatment plan, and they're all there. The next thing that you want to recognize, the yellow, the green, and the red that you see right here, that's not going to show up on your screen. I've just put highlights here so that you recognize the difference. The top points are the extraordinary points. The bottom points are the divergent points, or the middle are divergent, and the bottom are left-right. You have choices at this point. You could pick and choose. If you want to do a full root treatment and just, you could do the extraordinary and divergent on the front, and then you could turn the patient over and also do the left right on the back and call it done. That would, and add some muscular points, that you could do all of that. I don't typically add the back points to the extraordinary and divergent. If my patient needed to be face down, I might only choose the left right on the back. If my patient was face up, I might choose the extraordinary and divergent. If the graph is really, really messy, I would do extraordinary and divergent. If I'm further along in a treatment process and we're now beginning to unravel portions of what's going on, I might drop the divergent treatment and just do the extraordinary. And I would choose extraordinary just like I would have chosen extraordinary any time before. So know that always the first points listed, it'll either be 3 or 4, and you need to know the difference between what extraordinary points are. Sometimes I will use just extraordinary, and that will be my root of balancing the graph, and then I will move on. Yes?
Hey, I wanted to put up your handout. This seems like a good time. You prepared this nice PDF for everybody. So I just put up the link over there where you can download that, folks.
Okay. You're awesome. Thank you. All right. So here is another way. So here's a patient. Obviously, her graph is not it's not really super messy. It wouldn't be the typical time that I would choose to do a divergent treatment or an extraordinary treatment. But notice that if I'm clicking on element, the spleen is deficient and the stomach is excess. Now AccuGraph isn't going to tell you how to do this. This is just me thinking in an advanced way, but I could put the black clip on a stomach point because I want to sedate that channel. And I could put the red clip on a blue point because I want to tonify it. And I know the next question would be, Kimberly, well, what points would you use? Well, if I'm trying to balance out the spleen and stomach, I might be doing spleen 6 and stomach 36. I might be using the tonification and sedation points. You could simply use what AccuGraph recommends as the tonification and sedation points, but you could also use base, spleen, and stomach. And work accordingly. So that is another way that you can use your ion pumping cords. I would think about this if this patient typically has major digestive issues, if I'm not getting good results in regular grafting, or regular treatment, I might want to make my results a little more powerful and use the ion pumping cords. I'm going to give another example within the element. Here is the lung and the large intestine. One is deficient and one is excess. And then the spleen is excess and the stomach is excess. Those seem to be the major graph imbalances for this patient. So I can simply use, I could use the points recommended by the tonification and sedation points, but this patient actually came in for a headache, and these were the imbalances that I saw in the graph. So to balance the graph, I worked with a spleen 6 and a stomach 36. And then I also knew that she was coming down with a cold. And so I used a lung 7 and an Li 4. So I simply just used the ability of the ion pumping cord to pull the excess from the large intestine channel and feed it to the lung, and the same for the spleen and stomach. So again, this is just me being creative on how I could use ion pumping cords based on imbalances in the element channel. A question you'll probably ask me, did I use the left or did I use the right? I can't remember exactly. I used 2 sets of cords. So a spleen and a stomach, I used 1 cord, and a lung and a large intestine, I used the other. I probably chose opposite sides and did accordingly based on what I was feeling under my finger. That's the best I can give you there. Okay. There is another way that ion pumping cords are used within AcuGraph, and it's called the kidney, well, not in AcuGraph, in general, that Mikishima used ion pumping cords for, he called it the kidney return protocol. I use this protocol when I have a patient that has a really, really low average and I just can't get those numbers to come up, is extremely kidney deficient. They're really weak. They've had a sickness or a disease and they just need extra energy. And when I was reading in the book that I told you about in the last webinar, the channel Divergence, and the way Mikishima describes it is when there's little or no chi left to work with, he says that the kidney channel is inherently weak, and then when the patient is really sick and that the kidney channel just doesn't have what it takes to give all that it needs, this protocol that I'm about to show you allows you to rally up what chi is available in the kidney channel, bring it to the surface, make it more usable so that you could move on to other treatments. So here is an example of how this works. And again, this is, you wouldn't just click this within AcuGraph. Perhaps maybe it's something we should add in the future, but you're using bladder 11, bladder 23, and bladder 40. So if the patient is face down, you would clip bladder 40 first, and that is to bring energy up in the bladder channel. And then you're going to share it with bladder 23 and bladder 11. So you'd have black clips would be on bladder 40, and your red clips would be on bladder 23 and bladder 11. So this is similar to the theory within the video that I just showed where you had 2 clips on 1 wire. So you have both black clips on bladder 40 and then you would move it forward. I had a couple of notes I wanted to share. So I was reading in AcuGraph on the bladder 11, I was trying to figure out exactly why they chose bladder 11. Bladder 23 is the back shoe of the kidney, and but bladder 11 is the influential point of bones and the sea of blood. So I feel like there's a lot of strength that comes from bladder 11, and that's why it is used. So there's that. Now you have a way to use your ion pumping cords to take an extremely deficient patient and strengthen them. If Mikishima said sometimes he would use this only as his root treatment, other times he would do this treatment alone for 10 minutes and then move on to his next treatment so that the next treatment could be better. So this changes the philosophy of do these points and then add all the chief complaints in. This is a special circumstance. If your patient couldn't lie face down and they needed to be more in the supine position, the points recommended by Mikishima were kidney 10, CV6, and bladder 1. So notice CV6 would have 2 clips to it, and kidney 10 would have 2, and then bladder 1 is what he talks about in the book. I'm, again, still not comfortable with needling bladder 1. I would do bladder 2. So you're using 4 wires, and kidney 10, actually I say kidney 10 will have 2 wires, but so will CV6. So this is how you would use it if they were front. Okay, so I want to move on and talk about a branch treatment, and I just have a couple of suggestions on how you can use ion pumping cords for unique branch treatment approaches. And one, Adrian talked about it earlier when he was talking about the science. Mikishima recognized that you could treat burn victims with ion pumping cords. And so this is just a little bit of information to put in your bank of knowledge if you ever had a burn patient. So what would be done is you would place aluminum foil over the burn loosely. Just put the aluminum foil over the burn, and you would clip the black clips to the aluminum foil, and then you would use the red clip on any distant point on the channel. So if you're looking at this particular patient, notice that it's the lung, the large intestine, and the Sanjiao channels. So I would use 3 ion pumping cords. I'd put the wire over the hand, or the aluminum foil on the hand. I'd put 3 black clips onto it, and then I would choose distant points from there, somewhere on those 3 channels. I would put needles in them, and I would put red clips, and I would leave them there. If I was doing this treatment, I wouldn't use ion pumping cords as my root treatment. I maybe would treat the ear as my root treatment, and then I would do the branch treatment with the ion pumping cords. So maybe that will help some of you in the future. And then one other treatment that is sort of famous for the ion pumping cords, again through Mikishima, is his whiplash treatment. And this has to do with the Sanjiao. Looks like I have a typo in my written here. So you're going to, cord 1 and 2 are going to be on both sides of, so you're going to do bladder 62 and SI3 on the left. And then you would do an SI3 and a bladder 62 on the right. So then cord 3, you're doing the Sanjiao. You're doing Sanjiao 5 and gallbladder 41 on the left. You'll want to do Sanjiao 5 and gallbladder 41 opposite on the right. So you want to do left, right, and you're doing the Sanjiao, and you're doing the U-beach or the do. So that is a really good treatment for a whiplash patient, and you would use that as a branch treatment. So you're in your handout, this is just a picture of what your handout looks like over to the left, and it kind of takes you through a step-by-step process. This webinar has been a 2-part series. So we've tried really hard to make sure that you have all the links to the emails that we've posted and a way to get the ion pumping cords if you're wanting to add them into your treatment, and walk you through the process. It's the first webinar that we've done as an advanced theory approach, and we're hoping that you got a lot out of it. We enjoyed doing it, and I'm going to just peek over and see if there's any questions. Let's see. So do you use blue and red lasers on bladder 2 and stomach 2 so close of the eyes? You would have the patient with their eyes closed, and you can use the blue and laser close to the eyes. The whole purpose is to make sure the patient's eyes are closed. You would never shine it into the eye, but you can use points around the eyes.
On that laser thing, I would just add this. You can, if you're going to treat a point near the eye, close the eye and then place a couple of fingers over the patient's eye so that you're blocking light, making sure the eye stays closed, and then place the laser on the point. And that's kind of just an extra precaution and protection for them.
All right, so somebody asked if I would go back to the whiplash slide, which is filled with typos. I'm sorry about that, you guys. And Catherine, did you have a specific question about the whiplash slide? Okay, well, please go back for whiplash. I don't see any more questions. So I do apologize for the whiplash. You want to do both sides of the body. So you do Sanjiao 5, gallbladder 41 on the left with the black and the red, and then again with the black and red, same order, Sanjiao 5, black, red, gallbladder 41, but then you would do it again on the right. So that is it for ion pumping cords. I hope that you feel like you know what you're doing with them, or at least feel confident enough to get started, and it's life-changing in your clinic. You'll find those patients that you just couldn't get to a new level, you'll be able to take them to a whole new level, and your patients will be fascinated.
Excellent. I see a couple more questions coming in, and I just want to reiterate that today's webinar is part 2. So Kimberly just started right in, assuming that you already had part 1 and understood the information there. Go back and review part 1 if you need to, so that you get the background that you need. And then, Kimberly, there's that question from Robin about blue and red lasers.
So would I trade them both at the same time? If it felt really comfortable for me to stand, and yeah, I think I would. I think I would treat them both at the same time.
I would too. It's more time efficient. Red on one point, blue on the other, 15 seconds or so, and then move on to the next pair.
Yep, 15, 20. I might go a little bit longer just to, yeah, I guess it's all about what you feel, but 15 to 20 seconds would be the minimum. And somebody else asked if I could go back and talk about the typos again. I don't have time right now, but the webinar is going to be available for you to rewatch again later. So I've gone over time, and I think we'll need to end it for now.
Okay. Hey, Kimberly, great job. No stress on the overtime. It was 5 minutes well spent.
Okay.
Thanks for all this great information. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and we will see you next time.
All righty.
Bye-bye.